Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order this evening. Thank you. And we'll take attendance. I know we have a few changes, so I'm here. Alan? Yes. John? Greg? Michelle is here. Jim is still not here. Stephanie is now gone. Jennifer? Thought I saw you. Okay. Lisa? Michael? Here. Julie? Peter? Okay, we still have a quorum. So, moving to the next item on the agenda, public comments. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the reports, beginning with the chair's report. I would like to open up by asking the board to, for a moment of silence in memory of Mrs. Armini. Thank you for that. I shared with the board, actually just before, about an hour before the meeting, so probably nobody saw it yet, although I know one person who did because I did get a response. I shared an article that was shared with me on hydroponics taking root in the state of Connecticut. And it was a rather interesting article, quick read, just a few pages. So I emailed the link to everybody and also a PDF of not so great quality, but at least it's in your inbox one way or the other. But a couple of highlights, where the article basically said that you can produce more with 1 acre of land indoor than you can outdoor. Because your yield is 52 weeks a year, not obviously just the growing season. But another couple of facts is it's an 800 hydroponics specifically is an $821 million a year business. I believe that's a national number, and that's as of 2016. But the sector is growing at 4.5% a year. And of the 2,000 or 2,300 and change farms across the nation, 4% of them are here in Connecticut. One's in Cheshire, one is in East Hartford, and I believe there may be one up in Torrington as well. But it's an interesting, the popular products are lettuce, tomato, cucumbers, and if you are in Stop and Shop or Le Bon's, if you happen to frequent that, and you see a name from Maple Lanes, that's hydroponically grown vegetables. So they're being grown locally and sourced back into some of our local shops. Which kind of gives us an idea or two that why can't we do that with our Ag STEM program and source them into some of our local restaurants, right, on a smaller scale. But it's really interesting to see where science, where the future of agriculture is going, and that we could be part of that. So I just thought I'd share that since there's a lot more interest in our communities lately about Ag STEM and what it is and what it isn't, and the fun places you can go. So with that, Pat?
Okay, thank you. Board members all have a bag, a Chapad bag, and those are from Minds in Motion last weekend. And I was supposed to be giving to you last week, but Kim left them in the trunk of her car. But I just wanted you to see the great job that the volunteers did and all of the handouts that they gave to really promote our schools. And the bags are for you. So, and again, we're going to have Julie King do a presentation, short presentation, just so you can see that went on. Wednesday's Cabe Day on the Hill has been canceled till the following week because of the weather. Just so you're aware, the last day of school right now is Thursday, June 21st. And I don't know what's going on Wednesday and Thursday, so we'll see what happens. I do want to just echo Chairman's moment of silence. This morning, we had a memorial here for Ro Armini, and it was just beautiful. The choir sang, the band played. Tom Scarola sang 2 songs. He sang Fire and Rain and Here Comes the Sun, a cappella, with a guitar, but by himself, just, in the mall. What a moving tribute. I'm so proud of the kids and the staff. It's so difficult for the staff because they have to comfort and take care of the kids when they've really lost one of their, closest colleagues. So it has really been very, very difficult. But in that sadness has come such wonderful togetherness with the kids and the community, and she was just, she was the heart of the school in many ways. She's been a guidance counselor for many years. She has the kids in the middle school, so she knows them as they go all the way up. She has been a source of comfort and strength and support to parents and families, and it really is a tough loss for our school and for her family. Her family is still going to Texas. Her husband and her daughter and her granddaughter, they're going to move down by her son and daughter-in-law and little baby. And Saturday was the memorial service, and it was just, she was really loved, and she left a legacy of kindness and love and just support. And it was really wonderful. I know that Jen and Michelle were there today. I don't know if anyone else was there, I didn't see, but so proud of everyone here, everyone. I just can't say enough how beautiful the day was. Sad, very sad, but really beautiful. So I just wanted to let the board know that, you can really be proud of the staff and the students here at Chippewa. And I do know that you had requested that we send flowers, but the service was only 2 hours. So to me, it
Whatever's
didn't make
appropriate.
sense. So yeah, so I think we'll make a donation to the Kind Club, because that was Mrs. Armini's club that she loved, and so I think that would be an appropriate donation. Okay, so I'm going to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to just, I'm up to 2A. Here you go. This is, Chairman asked me to contact Region 14, which I did. It's hard to get in touch with them a lot, but they sent us the enrollment numbers for the fall 2017 application and enrollment numbers. Now, I want to just start by saying these are their numbers, and I didn't want to make any changes, but they don't line up correctly in certain areas. But the general idea is there, okay? Because we tried every which way to get them to, match up, and you couldn't have a check and balance. But I think there's a lot of good news here. First of all, now this is the current kids who are in 8th grade who applied in September, October, November in their high schools. So that are going to go to Nanuag in this coming fall.
Fall of 2018.
Right, but these are the numbers from the 17 applications. Okay, so I just want to make sure. So, without any recruitment, we have seen 56 applications from Region 12. Okay? I'm sorry, Region 12 schools, sending schools. Now, some of the numbers are interesting. New Fairfield and Sherman especially, their numbers are low, but those schools are very far away from Nanuag. Those schools are much closer to Region 12. And you also have a friend in one of those districts who may promote it a little bit. So that's a great thing. Those numbers are going to go up. Now, I checked. Let me explain to you what the wait list is, because it's not exactly what we want it to be, but we have to deal with the reality of what it is. Kids all take an admissions I'm saying an admissions test, but it's not really a test. It's your resume, it's your interview, it's your service, and you get a score. So you get a running score from all of these, the interview, all of these different components. Then Nanuag ranks the kids from the highest score all the way down to, if they get 500 applications, to 500. They only accept the first 65 kids. Number 66 is on the wait list. It doesn't mean that number 66 was accepted or not accepted. There was no space, so they were on the wait list. So what happens then is, as people from 1 to 65 say, yes, I'm coming, or no, I'm not coming, then people from the wait list get picked to come. So that's kind of how it works. So if we say these were our numbers our first year, where we had, okay, and we were accepting a freshman class, you could accept, if you wanted to, all 56 kids, which would be a lot more than what we budgeted for. And this is, again, without recruitment and without really getting a lot of kids from those areas. Now, Danbury, you know, they have a cap, but their cap is less than 9. So they're already over their cap. So these numbers to me are very positive and really bode well for getting kids in the program, really. So I think we should be very happy about that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, it came up about ELL students. When students, let me tell you how ELL currently works in the high school. Now, we have Heidi Adele, who is our ELL teacher. She doesn't service kids every day, like for a period. So what will happen is, kids who have ELL, when they're in the elementary school, they get some more direct service and you work with the teacher. If they're in a bilingual school, they literally are getting educated in the 2 languages, Spanish and English. Here, what we do is we provide support for those kids through maybe a structured study, maybe during advisory. So we don't have extra expenses per se for ELL, because it's one of Heidi's teaching periods. That's how we handle it. When you think about the kids who tuition into us at the high school in Chapag, if those kids have special education costs or needs, those parents need to pay that. If you think about the kids who are tuitioned in and their kids need to see the guidance counselor or need counseling once a week, and it's not a special education service, it's kind of inferred that that's part of the educational experience that we are providing for them. And we do that now. We do that regularly now. So if we get ESL kids, unless they were caused to need a paraprofessional or have some special education services, we're really bearing those costs within our budget, which we do already. There's not going to be a lot of extra costs. Because the other piece of it is, remember, when you apply to be in the agri-science program, you know, you have to be interviewed, you have to show that you have a passion for it, you know, you have a lot of things to do. And, you know, someone who gets in, who ELL is their, English is their second language, they're really motivated to do this because they're getting high scores on the admissions. So that's all the information I could really find. It's, superintendents right now are very busy with the safety issues going on in the school, the possible walkouts next week, budget. So it's been hard to get people to give me direct answers, but from the different people I've spoken to, that's what's going on. So I think that's my report. All right, is there anything else? Yeah, that's my report.
So on the applications that they have listed here,
Yes.
so we really don't know necessarily if, tell me if I'm wrong, if all 56 of these students, if their work capacity would have been admitted based on the criteria, do we? Or are we saying everybody who's in this queue has already been vetted and is a viable student?
From my understanding, they keep taking students till they hit their maximum of 65 kids at Nanawag. And every year, they have other kids who they have to turn away. Okay? And that's why we are opening our program. So I don't know how far the criteria goes down. I don't know if like number 150 is really ag STEM,
Yeah.
ready.
Well,
I don't know.
That's what I'm trying to just to think about, because when you look at the 26 then are on the wait list, you'd say, oh, all 26 would come because we have the capacity, or would only 20 come because 6 of those really weren't going to make the cut?
Right.
I mean, there's got to be a cut at
Sure.
some point, right?
Yeah.
And that was never clear, and I don't think still is, clear how Nanawag is doing that or where the line gets drawn to understand the strength of the wait list,
Right.
right?
Well, I think as you think about the program and you think about hiring the Ag STEM director, you put in the criteria for what you want the cut to be. So if you have a right to do that. You're going to say we want, you have to a rubric for interviews, certain attendance, certain scores. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure you can look at their test scores. You can look at their records. You know what I'm saying? You can put that in. But the other thing is, and this is just the other side of the coin, a lot of times, kids who have this passion are not the kids who are stellar on their test scores. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they want the tactile learning. They want they have a passion in a different way. So I think you have to just be careful. You just have to make sure when you make the criteria, you're really looking at, it in a way that is fair to all concerned. That would just be my, advice. And the other piece is, this is very different than other programs. If kids are not performing, you just say, thank you very much, you're going back to your home school. Do you know what I'm saying? It's very different than some of the other issues we've been dealing with as far as kids being here and, do they stay, do they not stay? Here, they do that all the time. We get kids back from Nanawag. I did in Bethel and I did here. Because they have to know you're here, you're a guest, this is a privilege. You either follow the rules and live up to our expectations, or, you go.
Right. Michael?
It's been a while since Bill Davenport presented to us, but I'm wondering if you could tell us, Pat, for the towns that you have listed here, what does he do for recruitment? Does, for example, he go to Sherman and make a presentation, or you're not sure what?
No, I know what he's done in the past. I can't say exactly what he did here, but I can tell you that in the past, because he has not had the room,
Right.
he just literally goes to the guidance departments and say, listen, I'm going to come on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and I'll be in the library, and please let anybody know who may be interested come. Some schools, he may come at night if they say, we want you to do a presentation. He's done that. He is not recruiting. This surge, I can call it a surge, this surge is due to the interest in a new program with new facilities in a school that has a very good reputation and has a private school mentality that, know every kid, small class sizes, all of those things. The other piece here is that Bethel's not on this list. Okay? Bethel's still up. Bethel will still come here. We just have to approach them, and they just wanted to wait till they knew we were moving forward. So my suggestion is also to get a group. You need to get a group to go down and meet again with Bethel, because they never turned us down. They just never voted. They wanted to wait until they knew we had the program. So that's another group here that I know there are people in Bethel who want to come here for the agri-science because they stop me all the time.
So,
I just, so that I understand this correctly. Oh, he's not here. It says there were 56 applications.
Mm-hmm.
29 were accepted, 7 said no, but they currently have 22, so they did not go back to the wait list to fill in the gap.
Well,
Or did they from the other towns?
Well,
Or,
you have to
I'm just trying to
understand.
wonder.
because only 29 were accepted from here, and they take 65, that means, how many, 40?
A bunch.
Yeah,
Were
30.
accepted in the other
thir-
towns.
36 kids were accepted from the other towns.
Yeah.
Okay? We got these numbers a while ago, so they may still be in the, I don't know when you have to let them know that you're coming. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know the timeline. It may not have even approached yet.
Oh,
know
right,
what I'm
because
saying?
this is for 2018, so
Yeah,
they're not there
they're
yet.
not there.
Okay.
So it's,
So
you know,
they might keep dipping back to
yes,
the wait list. Gotcha.
exactly.
Okay,
They might,
thank you.
absolutely.
Thanks.
There was something else I was going to say. and I
No, but
forgot.
that's all you're thinking about. I mean, that's a good point, because if you look at this list, you have to resist going, and starting adding numbers down across the bottom, right, and thinking, oh, this is what we can get, because there's going to be some movement there, and we saw that from the numbers we analyzed the last, 5 years of data last year that we looked at, that the waiting list moves. What it starts with and the ends with are two different numbers, because they're picking off that wait list as the attrition is occurring in the process,
Right.
right?
Which also, because Nanawag has such a space issue, they haven't probably, and I think from long ago conversations, I remember, it didn't seem like they were going approaching the wait list until much later in the game. So I think timing is important, because if you've been, if they said no, if you're not accepted, and then that sits there for 5 months, people make other plans, they get, they make the best of it. So I just think we should be cognizant of that and a timetable so that we don't lose the wait list. Because people will say no. If they're applying in the fall, like, the fact that they went through that entire application process and were accepted and then said no meant that's, plans changed, somebody moved, whatever happened.
Right.
So we want to hit that wait list quickly as we get those no's, so that we don't lose those people.
Julie?
I'm sorry, Pat, I might have missed this, but what was the discrepancy with Region 12 that's footnoted?
We tried to really dive deep into these numbers to get, have checks and balances. So, for example, if you look at Region 12, we had 4 applications. 3 were accepted, okay? 1 is on the wait list, okay? So that's correct, 4, 3 plus 1. But there are only 2 enrolled. So somewhere we lost a child. I'm not sure where, but I didn't want to change their numbers. We're thinking the person either said no. I don't know. And it was not only there were 4 towns where there were discrepancies in numbers. I took out our numbers and didn't give you everybody's numbers because it's just a lot of numbers. But there are 4 towns that it happened to, and I couldn't get anybody on the phone to explain it. Not that I think they even could. What I will tell you that I know for sure is we currently have 2 kids in each grade at Nanawag. Okay?
And we'll have 2 next year.
Yeah. So we're averaging 2 a year. Now, understand, those kids come back. A lot of kids, I know this from, I have a friend in Bethel whose son is currently a 9th grader in Bethel High School, and he got accepted to Abbott Tech, and he really wanted to go to Abbott Tech. But he didn't want to leave his friends. He didn't want to leave his friends, who he was with from kindergarten. And that happened. You know what I'm saying? They get in, they do all the work, and then they have to make that decision, and it's... And I know people here in this school who have thought about going to Nanawag, and they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave the small school. They don't want to leave this. It's a beautiful place to go to school, And Nanawag can be a very scary place for kids who are here. It's a very different school. It's a very different environment. So, a lot of that plays into it.
Any other questions on the enrollment numbers? If not, thank you, Pat. I appreciate you chasing this down. We'll go to the committee reports. Start with Ed Advance. Michelle, anything?
Yep. So I attended our board meeting last week and learned a lot of stuff, as I always do, about all the programs that Ed Advance has. Just a couple of highlights, things that I think are of interest to us, and just so you all know, that we have been taking advantage of. But what the board has been doing is meeting the directors of different programs. They've been coming to our meetings and explaining what they do. We met this very interesting, very bright guy, Kevin Glass, who has, he does data research, and he works with the districts to help analyze their data and can do project work. So if, for example, we felt like we needed some research, like we had a big pile of data that we just didn't have the personnel to dive into, we could send that over and ask for help with that. He's also been doing his own research. They have this new assessment, they call it CAT, and it assesses critical thinking skills, and which is what we've all been trying to move towards, but find it difficult sometimes to assess the critical thinking piece, and has had some really good results from that in the assessment. So he will be meeting with the Curriculum Council, which I know Teresa DeVrito goes to on occasion. I think, I don't know how often they meet, monthly, maybe? I don't know, not quite monthly, but he will be touching base with the Curriculum Council. So that was, I thought, interesting, because sometimes if we don't have a lot of staff here, and if we have projects that we're looking for. There were also some interesting areas I felt that sort of for the business office. They're working on a health insurance collaborative, which is early in its development, but maybe if it grows, it could be something that in the future years we could take a look at. They're also trying to set up groups for regional sharing of personnel. So if, whether that's teachers or administrators or whatever it might be, whether in any position, they're finding that a bunch of the smaller districts up in the northwest corner need services but can't quite hire a full-time person, and it's hard to find somebody who's quality but only 0.4, 0.6. So looking at helping districts share personnel. So that's just another thing that we can keep in mind. I think that's it. I mean, there were other exciting things happening for them. They're looking at purchasing the UConn campus in Torrington, which would be wonderful for Ed Advance. Their program, the programs that they have that are really growing are their Head Start and a lot of the special education programs that they do, or students who are not special education but have either been expelled from school or are struggling in school and need an alternative education. So they've been sort of piecing they have programs in Danbury and in Torrington are sort of their two hubs, and they've been renting. They've got an old parochial school in one place and some old office buildings in another, so they've piecing it together. So that's something that is on the forefront that's very exciting for Ed Advance, and are hoping will come through. Yeah, that's it. There's so many programs that they do. They're really a wonderful resource for us, and we need to remember that to use them too, because we are small, and there are lots of ways that they can help us or put us in touch with the people that can help us. So that's it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Education, Michael.
We did have a abbreviated meeting this evening, and one of the items on the agenda is talking about our next education meeting for the board. We're planning on having a meeting at Washington Primary, and it's going to focus on makerspace. So that should be excellent. I know the program that we just attended at Booth Free was a wonderful program. So I thank the administration and Kathy in particular for hosting us for that meeting.
Facilities, Greg. Anything? Okay, thank you. Michelle, finance? You want to talk about the budget?
Well, we met for our regular meeting before this and did our regular work. We went through the books through February, and everything is looking good, tracking well. A few additions from the previous month, but nothing very alarming. And at this point, I think there's 2.2% of the budget remaining, which is, I think, did you say it was 2.1% last year? So, yep. So that's what we would expect. We looked at the staffing changes that are in the budget that we're going to talk about later tonight, so I won't go over that. Bob shared with us a lot of nice background detail on the work he's been doing for the health insurance renewal. Historical look at the premiums, at claims paid, at the quotes that he's gotten from other providers, and is continuing to work on that. I think what I want to point out that was shared with the committee is that our average increase for the last 14 years was 5.17%, which is remarkable. Bob's done a fantastic job of negotiating. That is so much lower than the industry average or the market on the whole. But what that means is that it was our time, and that he's having he's been able to keep it down, but doesn't look like there's a lot we can do about that. And I just wanted to point out, it was because we're talking about the health insurance. We'll talk about it more when we talk about the budget, but the health insurance renewal for next year is adding over $500,000 to our budget from the previous year. And if you look at the increase, the percentage increase, and I did the math, it's like 62% of that increase. So there's just not a lot we can do about the biggest hunk of that. So we'll talk about that more when we talk about the budget later. We also looked at an updated enrollment report that had been requested that looks at the one that Dr. Prouda does, and it has some additional appendices that look at the projections without the tuition and students that are just the town. So we have the projected with the tuition and students and projected without, so that we could really kind of see what was going on there. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, long range, or we're going to pass?
We haven't met.
I have to take you off the agenda permanently. Greg, negotiations?
Yes, we're not currently in negotiations, but we're about to start negotiations with the two unions that are up this year.
And they are again?
Which ones are those?
They are the custodian and cafeteria workers union, and the union representing the paraprofessionals and clerical staff.
Thank you.
Non-central office clerical staff.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Just, I don't know if you'll remember, when did we last do the teacher contract? When is that coming up?
The teacher contract was just negotiated last year, and
So this will be the first of 3 years?
This will be the second of 3 years.
Next year. So this year, we're in year one. Next
Yes.
year.
You're in the first year now, and then next year will be the second year, and then there'll be the third year, and then it'll be
19, so
time. for the
1920, the 1920 school year. Okay.
Correct.
Just wondering.
Afraid of West Virginia happening.
No, it's interesting. Budget, ag stem, schedules, just, there's a lot of, I don't know. I was just wondering when the teacher contract was up. Well, not only that, but I don't know if we will need to ask something different of our teachers if things change. So I was just wondering when it comes back up. So when would negotiations for that would start? When would they start? If it's for the 1920?
Well, let's see, the last negotiations concluded in 2017 for the 17-18 contract, then the 18-19, and then the 19-20. So they'll start sometime in the spring of 2020.
Okay, spring of 2020 for the 2021.
And we try to conclude the negotiations prior to the expiration of the contract.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
Policy, Michelle?
Yep, we continue to meet every month, and the fruits of our labor are on our agenda.
Okay. Can't wait.
Woohoo. Oh, actually, I have one other thing to add to that. Sorry, I was trying to be so brief, but we did talk about in our policy committee meeting at the last month, and then I had an opportunity to speak with Karen Fildes about the internet security, and CABE had the big article with several optional policies to look at, and what we'd like to do is we're going to have Karen come speak to the board as a whole about. We're going to look at all of our technology policies so we really understand what we have, because there's some updates that are going to need to happen with our use contracts, whether it's staff or Board of Ed or students, and just the way everything is changing. And then she'll also be able to tell us what is already in place, and then we can then go back into policy to sort of look at their suggestions and see what we feel would fit best for our district. But just so you know, and everyone knows that we're in good shape. It's all happening, or a lot of things are happening, and it's so there are kind of two areas. There's the policy that the board sets, but then there are regulations and administrative practices that just happen whether we have policy or not. So I don't want anyone to think that because we don't have the security policy that it's not happening. It is, and we want to be careful as we move forward with, especially technology, with any kind of policy that's not overly prescriptive, because we would be updating every month, and it would drive us crazy.
It would be out of date before
yeah,
you.
Exactly. Before we
started.
even got to our second reading, which has happened with administering meds, which makes me crazy. But so we'll just be mindful of that. Just because CABE has 5 optional policies does not necessarily mean we want to add them. They're just giving us different looks at the issue. I also spoke with Karen. We sort of felt with this budget season and all the things that we have going on this spring, that this might be a good, it's not an emergency, so it might be a good topic either for the summer or fall, moving forward, that we don't need to get to it right immediately because we have some other pressing.
Yeah, we're just for those. We're talking about policies that have to do with things like securing your data, protecting your data against disaster recovery, protection against malware, protection against ransomware, and all the other things that can really ruin your day. So that's really, again, to your point, it's not like none of this is happening and we aren't doing things to protect the district and the information and the privacy, et cetera. But when you look at the policies, it's time for the policies to kind of catch up to the reality,
Yeah.
right, of what we're doing. So thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Okay. New business. Greg, it is time for your, well, actually Bob, we'll start with Bob. Bob,
Sure.
Agstem.
What has happened is that on the 26th of February, which was last Monday, $221,110.23 were approved. It's in process of being paid. So at this point in time, we've now paid $1 million, including that payment that's in process, $1,029,235.30 cumulative to date through the 26th of February. That's the long and the short of it. So we're still on track. We have nothing at the moment that's pending. looking at Greg. I think we caught everything up, and now we're just moving forward and keeping the project going. But Greg, I guess that's up to your number B. I did A, you got B.
Well, we've got a lot of housekeeping things done. We have concluded 3 amendments to the agreement with the architect to cover everything from the work that we had to do related to septic, traffic engineering, T2, which was advice on the curriculum and also assisting us in designing the school. So we have pretty much caught up with that work. The contract is all up to snuff. We have one more amendment coming in, a 4th amendment to it, that's going to make some housekeeping changes. Nothing that's going to increase the cost or decrease the cost. It's merely things like we need to put in the name of the commissioning agent, which wasn't hired when the original contract was done. And so there'll be a few things like that. And then after that, we will be completely up to date with that. The design development phase of the project, schematic design and design development phase of the project are essentially finished. They may have a couple of little things to polish that up. And then we'll be moving on to the construction documents phase of the project, which is what we need in order to put the project out to bid. In the meantime, we'll have meetings with DAS, and we're also in the process of permitting the project currently right now. We've been in front of the Wetlands Commission in Washington one night. We are going to be in the Planning Commission tomorrow night, Wednesday night rather.
Wednesday.
And then I believe it's the 15th back to the Wetlands Commission or somewhere. I believe it's the 15th. I have to look at my calendar. But the Wetlands Commission is actually coming to do a site walk tomorrow. And we'll be back in front of them at some point. Maybe it's the ZBA that we're going in front of on the 15th, but we've got a number of appointments to be back in front of commissions and in order to try to get the permitting done in about 2-3 months. And that will keep us on track. So that's where we are. And we're moving rapidly to move this on to the point where we can bid. We're still on schedule. They have not given me a new schedule yet. So we're still on the schedule we have, and we're still, anticipating a delivery of the school in the fall of, or I should say middle of August of 2019. Delivery of the main part of it, with the exception of certain science labs and some of the science labs and the greenhouse.
So before you do that, I forgot to share with the board that we have a new member of the building committee.
That is true. I should have told you that.
Well, well, go ahead, you.
Well, we're pleased to have our former board member Tony Bedini is now going to be serving on the building committee. He has joined us, and the building committee is now 7 people, and we're off to the races. So that's our latest addition.
Yeah. We're happy to have Tony back, and speaking with him, he's happy to be back. So good for us. Now everything's good. Michelle.
Greg, if the planning meeting gets canceled, can you send out an email because of the weather? Could you send an email to the board?
Yes.
Because I don't know how else I would know.
Planning would be, excuse me, but that will be canceled by the town of Washington.
I'm
Once
assuming.
we're notified, we'll make sure.
Oh, and you might get notified too.
We
if
wouldn't cancel that meeting. It's
No,
really
I know we wouldn't, but I wouldn't know if the town canceled it.
Yeah, my guess is that in view of the fact that they're predicting some 9 inches of snow for Wednesday, I suspect that meeting will be canceled. Well, I shouldn't say 9 inches of snow. They're predicting 9/10ths of an inch of precipitation, which you multiply by 10 to get 9 inches of snow. So that's where it may be canceled. If it is, we'll let you know. We'll let the board know as soon as we know.
Great, thank you.
Good. Okay, thanks, Fred. Bob, thank you. Michelle, you're up for policies.
All right,
We're excited.
exciting. We should have basketball games. All right, administering meds. This is, we're up for a second reading. This is the policy for the storage and administration of naloxone, also known as Narcan, which is an opioid overdose recovery medicine. Two things I want to point out. So the only language that you'll see that is green is what the committee, we added, and any other authorized trained individuals. And we put that there to match somewhere else in the policy where that appeared, just so that it would be consistent. So that wasn't actually new language, but we just noticed in one place it said the nurse. Oh, wait a second. Oh, no, that's the supplies. Anyway, so that was to be consistent, so that didn't say nurse in one place and other authorized trained individuals. And we chose to leave that in there to make the policy flexible enough so that we could start with the school nurse, and then we could choose to add trained individuals if we wanted to. So that's that change. The other thing I just wanted to let you know is the reason there was a delay in this is because we were asked to run it by our board counsel. And he did get back to us, and he said that that their law firm, I forget, what is the S&G? Whatever. Shipman and Goodwin. Shipman and Goodwin have their own policy for Narcan. So it is a policy that they have for themselves. And the language in ours is very similar to theirs. But we chose to stick with the CABE model because it makes the updating for us much easier because of the numbering and the wording fits. So that was that. He also just reminded us that there's currently no statutory or regulatory guidance, but that the state has informally informed them that they'll be treating it treating the administration of Narcan similarly to the epinephrine policy, which we have in our administering medication policy. So he just said to proceed with caution, which is why we did not go beyond the CABE policy, because we had talked about moving this beyond into after-school hours and whether it should also be coaches and trainers and everyone, and we decided to just stick with the nurse for now. We'll see what happens with the state. I got an update from CABE on the agendas of all of the committees that are meeting right now at the Capitol. I don't remember if it was the I think it might have been the Education Committee meeting is actually, this is on their agenda. So it will be moving forward shortly. There should be some guidance from the state.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did they talk about the SRO? Is Barbara capable of administering?
We talked about it in the policy committee, and we figured the way the policy reads, it says that, or that phrase, any other authorized trained individuals. So
Capture her.
we can allow, and that can be an administration decision. So if the SRO is comfortable or is trained, which would make sense because a lot of police officers are carrying.
That's what I
yeah.
thought, yeah.
Yeah, so we can choose to just who we want to authorize, and that was
got it.
one that we felt pretty comfortable about.
Okay,
Yeah, good question.
all right. Do I have Greg?
Move we adopt proposed policy 5141.213 for a second reading.
Second.
Michael, thank you. Any further questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
First reading?
All right, so this is a first reading under graduation, or requirements for graduation. Just so you know, the state of Connecticut has currently given guidance for changing, or their requirements for graduation, but they will not be in effect for not for next year, but the year after, the 2019 class. So if you look at this policy, humanities, science, career, all of that is the same, and we will be reviewing that either most likely in the fall, once the administration has a chance to really work with the new state recommendations. However, if you scroll down towards the bottom of the policy, there is the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy, which is a seal that would be on the diploma acknowledging a student's proficiency in a second language. And the state has offered, they have given guidelines or tests to to help determine that proficiency. And the new legislation that just went into effect allows for this seal of biliteracy. And our administration would like to start that this year. So we are bringing the graduation requirements, the old requirements, but with the seal of biliteracy updated so that this current class could have that seal.
So what's a high rate of literacy? Or what's a high proficiency of literacy? How are we defining that?
I know that the state has guidelines, but I don't know what they are.
Some of the AP exams. Right.
Okay. So they have actually written the test for all the languages.
Right.
Okay. 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 So the state has
So it's not as simple as completing 4 years of a
No.
language.
And the AP exam is one of the assessments.
But the idea here was, because if you're taking the AP exam, that's already on your transcript. This was really a way to acknowledge language acquired outside of the classroom. So whether it's a language spoken at home or, Hebrew classes on the weekend or whatever it is, if you meet this proficiency, you get this seal. Any French or Spanish classes that you take during the year are going to be on your transcript anyway.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Okay, do I have a motion? Unless there's, we'll get around to it. Go ahead, Greg.
Move we adopt proposed policy 6146 on requirements for graduation for first reading.
Second? Thank you, Julie. Any further questions? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstain. The motion passes unanimously. The first reading of policy 6146, requirements for graduation. Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to action items. Michelle, I'm going to give you back the floor, whether you know it or not.
I didn't. All right.
Well, they're all finance related.
That's fine.
Unless Greg, you would like, since it's kind of dual here, since it's facilities level funding. But Michelle, why don't you take the lead, and Bob is here to comment as needed.
All right. Well, so the first, it's to consider and, if appropriate, in accordance with CGS 1052, transfer up to 1% or $213,871 from the approved fiscal year 2017-18 budget appropriation into the reserve fund for capital and non-recurring expenditures as recommended by the Finance Committee at their February 5, 2018 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
Any questions? Alan?
It's just about the same time we do this every year. We do it.
Early.
It's a little early, right?
No, last year we did about the same time, Alan.
Oh.
And obviously, it's pending the availability of funds.
Oh, of course, of course. I just wondered if it just seemed early. But if it's about the same time.
Me too.
Yeah, I don't know. It's usually somewhere in the budget process.
Yep.
It's March, April, May. I don't know. It's in the spring. We usually do it in the spring. So,
So
any
we
other
have,
questions?
do we have a, Greg, a friendly amendment to add pending the availability of funds? Should we do that?
Yeah, I accept that.
Sure.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I don't know what the alternative is if we don't have the funds available.
Right, I know. If
Well,
we
we
don't
could-
have it, we
no,
can't do it.
Well, we could take it out right now and then be short someplace else, which is not,
Not good.
which
No,
is,
we never.
there's an order of precedent here, right?
I know.
So we're not literally going to move it tonight, but
That man with the mustache at the end of the table, I'm not gonna let that happen.
I know that.
Now,
all right.
As long as I'm here.
All those in favor of the motion to appropriate or transfer 1% or $213,871 in this year's budget to the reserve fund. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye. Oh, it's habit, sorry.
Yeah, well, on this one, I'm the hands.
I did both.
Comes with money, I'd like to see the hands.
I always do both.
All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
2, transfer up to 1% or $213,871 from this year's budget to the reserve fund pending approval of available funds. Item number 2. Michelle?
All right, so this is, this,
If you like, Michelle, I could
Yeah, I
take
was
them
gonna
through
say
what
this-
some of these are.
sure, I'll let people ask you about what they are, but just to explain that these are items that, as Pat was explaining with the charts, things that need to happen that we can choose to happen in the operating budget or in the capital funds, either for the region or for the elementary schools. And so this is a proposal to not exceed $124,600 of things that need to happen this year to be funded out of our capital funds. And the only comment I would make before we look at the list of actual items is that because of the health insurance and the other needs that we have in the operating budget that are pushing it up, this is one of those years I would recommend moving things to these capital funds as much as possible. Seems like the appropriate time to do that. So if you want to talk about the items.
Well, I was just going to say the primary item is being carried, the Booth Free School, ADA access to the exterior. It's being carried at $100,000. We don't have an estimate on that yet because we're still in the design phase. It may very well come in less than that, but we're carrying that amount as what we thought was the outside number. So that may not be a real number. Mike?
Just a question on that, because when we did tour Booth Free School, they were going over that anticipated expense. Is that to make the front entrance
No.
as well as the side entrance ADA compatible?
No, actually, the front of the school is ADA compliant. You can get entrance into the school because they have the ramp in front of it. So the front's ADA compliant. You can exit the school, but what this is trying to do is to get an ADA compliant path from the rear doors to the gymnasium and the rear hallway to get from there down to the playground.
Playground, right.
And so we've looked at a couple of things, and it was determined that the best way to do it is to go behind the portables, go around the portables behind them, and that will get us down there with the right grades, because you really can't get those too steep. And so that's what we're doing, and we're hoping that it's going to come in less than this amount. I mean, we don't know yet, but we're hoping.
Would this include the exterior door from the student's classroom that they would be in as well?
No.
Because that needs to be ADA compliant as well, correct? In case of a fire or emergency.
Well, if the classroom is on the rear of the building, at the lower end of the building, those are all ADA compliant. I think, Don?
We're providing a path that goes the lower hallway towards the gym, out the end where the kitchen is, and out the gym door. The doors that are coming from the classrooms are about 6 inches. They do have pads on them. We would have to redirect those.
And so would that be included in the 100,000?
No.
Or would that be an additional expense? Would that be very expensive to add to that $100,000, or?
We're gonna see what it comes in, the path comes in at, and there may be some funds available towards the pads on the doorways. ADA compliance is 1 to 12, so if you're going up 6 inches, you're gonna go out, 6 feet.
Yeah, 6 feet.
Oh, my goodness. So it may not be as easy as it sounds.
It's always like that. And I guess my other question then, Don, would be that in order to make that one particular classroom that the student would need egress from compliant, would you be looking at making every classroom on that elevation also compliant? Or would you be looking at, as the student moves up in grades, just making each individual classroom compliant,
More than likely, that would be a scenario.
right? But I guess the expense this year would represent the biggest expense because of the access to the playground. And then subsequent years we would have an idea of every year what future expenses we would have.
The upper grades allow for use of the elevator to get down to the base. It would just be the lower grades up from the back of the building, whatever it is. I think there's 7.
And I'm sorry to bring up the elevator because that was another question. I know when I spoke with Kathy Colello about the students' access to the elevator, that we have one is great, but she wasn't quite sure if the student's wheelchair would actually fit in that elevator, how that is going to work. I don't know if you have any update on that.
I haven't been told.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know.
There was, Greg, there was another item on the modification, and that was to the bathroom adjacent to the cafeteria where is that being budgeted? Is that,
I don't know, Don, is that in your capital budget, or is it, because it's not on any of these?
Bathrooms will be coming out of the budget itself. The, 2000.
so that's,
The operating budget.
oh, okay, all right, okay. Okay,
It's part of page 9.
all right. So that's coming out of the lease funds,
Three
okay,
is
I got it. Yeah, I
Further
got
comment on your elevator comment. The elevators were designed for a standard wheelchair.
It's in page 9 on the
I
right.
looked at the newest types of chairs to determine whether they'll fit and how we're going to.
Yeah, I think they're looking at a motorized wheelchair, which has different dimensions than a student who broke their ankle and is in a wheelchair. And the other question would be, would the student be able to not only fit in their wheelchair on the elevator, but would a staff member be able to go with them?
Or any further questions? No, if not, can I have a motion, please?
All right, I'll move that we authorize the expenditure of an amount not to exceed $124,600 from the Elementary Capital Non-Recurring Fund, what we call the lease fund, as detailed in this list from the 2018-19 budget, as recommended by the Finance Committee on February 5, 2018. That includes the $100,000 for the Booth Free School ADA access to exterior, $3,500 Burnham School repair stairs, $7,100 pump water tank work at Burnham, $10,000 septic repair at Burnham, $4,000 gutter repair at Burnham. Total $124,600.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I just want to call to the attention of people who may be new to this process, since we've made an expenditure from this fund, is when we entered into leases about 9 or 10 years ago with the towns. The elementary schools are leased. They belong to the towns. And when we entered the leases, we agreed to put aside $100,000 a year into a fund that could be used to fund certain things at the elementary schools. The idea was we wanted to make sure we stayed on top of maintenance issues, and that because they had been a little bit neglected for a while, we wanted to make sure that we had those funds set aside specifically for that. And that's what this is for, and that's where these funds are coming out. We've been putting aside $100,000 a year, and we've spent most of it. Very little left. So,
Thank you, Greg. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? I'm sorry, Dennis, you got, okay. All those opposed? All those abstain? The motion passes unanimously as described herein. Moving on to the next item. Michelle?
Following the same idea, this is a list of work that we're looking to the 1% Capital Reserve Fund for funding for this year. It's a smaller amount, and actually, I we didn't go over it there. We have plenty of available funds for this. I think we have probably around 500,000, maybe more. I can find that if anyone wants to know the available balance. But it is the recommendation of the Finance Committee to move these projects that need to happen, their source of funding, to the 1% reserve fund.
Okay, the projects seem rather self-explanatory, but Greg, if there's anything you'd like to highlight?
I'm just going to make a motion to authorize transfer an amount not to exceed $47,350 from the 1% capital reserve fund for capital improvements from the 2018-19 budget as recommended by the Finance Committee on February 5, 2018, and that includes the Chippewa Valley School water tank valves and pump upgrade of $10,000, update paging clocks bell system $6,000, LED lighting for pool $8,000, the Booth Free School update paging clocks bell system for $6,000, $6,000 at Burnham for the same thing, and $6,000 at Washington Primary for the same thing, and finally a $5,350 exit emergency light and horn strobe at the central office. I have an issue with spending out of the 1% for anything other than really seriously needed emergency repairs, because what tends to happen is we hit that fund up in years past and then we don't adequately budget, and when we have years where the budget is below zero, we actually take a fall, and we're tapping this fund. We're spending the seed corn while we're reducing the budget below zero. But this year we've got a substantial increase due to things that are outside of our control, primarily the health insurance costs. And so this is one of those instances in which my usual approach to this is going to yield to say, let's go ahead and authorize this. It's a modest amount of money. I know the water tank valves and pump upgrade, if we don't want another leak, we need to do that. So I think that we can probably justify these items.
Michelle?
I just wanted to let everyone know I found the balance. So we currently have available $744,247 before the transfer that we just authorized. So that would bring that fund, if that transfer happens in full at the end of this fiscal year, that would bring the balance of that fund to $950,000. So we have that's the 1% fund. So there is funding for some emergencies that could happen. So I think it's wise to move the $47,000 worth of projects that need to happen.
And I also
that funding
offer
source.
that, if you look at the updated clocks and bell systems, it's across the district, and that line item is really $24,000. And, so at that, looking at it that way in aggregate, I think it's makes it feel more appropriate to use the 1% fund for something like that as opposed to, several small little
Right.
items. Because
That's
it's the same thing, only
Yep.
at 4 different places. So.
Anthony, I also wanted to add that the LED lighting in the pool area, the LED lights have been a godsend for us. We're slowly but surely LED lighting the school. Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that over the course of the past year, from our base cost of electricity, we have saved about $40,000 with the LED lighting of the mall and the hallways and other areas around the school. Something close to that, if I remember.
I did a comparison of today's fuel, oil, and kilowatt cost for electricity compared to 2012. And we're spending about $95,000 less than we were budgeting.
That's amazing.
Like,
Well, there you go. And a lot of it is because of these LED lights. They save an enormous amount of energy, and they're better light. I don't think anybody who's been out in the mall and the hallways around the school thinks that they looked better before with their previous lighting. So it's a much better, much more natural light. Don?
there's a few things. There's the lighting is a big source of savings. There's the VFDs, the variable frequency drive motors that we put in the pool. They ran at 30 amp full time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Right now, they're running at 7.3. Our UPS heating system went from steam to hot water, we saved a ton of money there. We've added new boilers, like the food school, the burn school, we added new burners. So we start adding up all of those savings, those energy efficiency items, we save a lot of money.
Yeah, that's right. And, one of the items that's been in our capital budget for a long time has been to replace the windows in the school. And this is the difference between a 40-year-old building and a new building. If we had a new modern building, we'd have much better insulated walls, and we'd have window panels be much better insulated. Our costs of energy would go down. But nevertheless, Don has managed to chip away at it with all of these improvements to the system. And obviously there's still more to come. This room hasn't been done yet with LED lighting, and it will eventually be done. One of the things that we did ask, at least I as building committee chair asked, is to try to get a sense of what we might do to this space since it's going to be under construction for 2 years, the far end of it. Is there something in this space we want to do that's different? Because the time to do it is when we've got the site mobilized. We probably save 30–40% of the cost of the work. So one of the things we'll want to do in this space eventually is we will want to upgrade the space like the rest of the building, including the lighting and including at some point in time, this flooring is going to have to be replaced with the resilient floor you see in the rest of the building. But these are continual improvements in the school that are paying very large dividends in terms of the savings and the appearance.
Just to add one important piece, it doesn't make dollars, but once you put those LED lights in, the frequency of having to go back up and change them diminishes so much, and you save so much labor that it doesn't show up in your costs, but it's a long-term savings because you don't have to keep trying to get up on that pool, and that pool is terrible.
Yeah, I could tell you that having spent a number of hours in the pool, it could use the lighting. I think it would have, with all the other work that's been done in that pool, I think it's just like the last piece that'll kind of bring it all together is they could actually see in there.
The pool, it presents a different problem because all the decks are angled.
Yeah.
Our scissor lift can't really get up there without jerry rigging it in some way.
Right.
So we've been aware of this. We needed lighting.
Oh, I know.
Opportunity for us to get up there one time and not have to get up.
Yeah. Not have to think about it again until you're retired, right? It's somebody else's problem.
It's the hope.
And improve the lighting and even save some money in the lighting.
Right. Michael.
Just a quick question. Are the rooms at Chapag, or actually in all our buildings, is the lighting system motion sensitive? In other words, if no one's in the room and the teacher happened to leave the light on, does it automatically cut out after a certain amount of time?
Throughout the district, that was an initiative done prior to becoming in 09. It was 10 years prior to that the board made an agreement with Honeywell to put up $1 million to save $1 million more plus. And that was part of that initiative. And yeah, we maintained that in the areas that it is presently. We're hoping in the future to start going into the classrooms and the hallways throughout the schools.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe we have a motion that's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? All those abstained? The motion passes unanimously as described herein. Now, back to the budget, or continuing on to the budget. Who's going to lead us? Pat, are you taking the floor again, or we just open it up for questions?
Val usually does. Well, Val used to,
Yeah,
anyway.
but
But
you
I'm
want?
happy, whatever,
Yeah.
however you want.
Floor is yours.
so the budget is on,
Michelle, before you start going,
Yeah.
we're getting close to where we have to change the disc out. Do you want to do that now?
Sure.
Before you start getting into it?
Yeah.
We do it now? Thank you. 10 minutes? 10 minutes? No, 5 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 seconds. 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
all right.
All right. we are back.
Yeah. Okay.
We're back from commercial break. And 3, so the floor is yours.
All right. So tonight's budget discussion, I was just speaking with Michael about this. My hopes for tonight are to go through this budget, not with the fine-tooth comb that we will do at the end, but in a little bit broader strokes with some details. But I want everyone to look at the areas where they might have questions so that we can be very prepared on our next meeting to have a budget discussion where we actually might set the budget. Yes, so I am not anticipating tonight, for example, us approving sections of it, going through the 100s and saying, do we approve of staffing, etc. What I would really like to do is go through each section. I've made notes. I've pointed out a few areas, things that have increased, things that have decreased. I have a few questions. And as we go through, make notes. And as over the next couple of weeks, if you have questions, please email me, because what I'm going to do is sort of collate all of these questions into questions for Bob and the administration. If there are any presentations that we need on the next budget discussion, questions that we have, whatever it is, I want to make sure that everyone fully understands what we're talking about as we move forward. I say that because this is the largest increase we've looked at in a while. And so we need to be able to understand where that increase comes from when we go back and I speak to the people in our towns. Because the boards of finance, our members, all of our constituents need to be able to ask us, well, why? What's going on here? And we need to be able to answer that. So I really want to just dive into the budget some tonight and make note of any questions that you may have, and I'll just let you know a few things that I pointed out. So the first, if you look at the first 3-4 pages, it's a lot of what was in the presentation that Pat did already, so I'm not going to review that, but you should take a look. That's the good information there, sort of the overview of the budget. And you can see at the bottom of page 1, where it points out the $850,000 increase that is being requested for this year. If you move to the color guide, it's page 2, but it's of this packet. It's farther into the page 2. This is where the pie chart is. This was in Pat's presentation. And as she pointed out, the largest section, the blue part of the pie, which is personnel services, those are all of the salaries, 56.9, so basically 57% plus the employee benefits, the red piece of the pie. So that is the largest chunk of our budget. Up above are the general categories. Without the detail. So if you would prefer to look at those, we could, but I always like to move into with more detail. So if we could go ahead and look at page 3. This is where we have all of the staff, the teachers, the administrators, tutors, paraprofessionals. There are a few places later on in the budget that are contracted out services, often having to do with special education, that are not right here, but for the most part, this is where all the people are. And one thing that I noticed was that this section was increasing 0.91%, even though the contracts are moving up at about a 3%. And Bob helped point out, if you look in the 111 category, teachers, if you look at the actual for 2016-17, and then you look at the budget for 17-18, you'll see, and then the budget for 2018-19. What happened there is we had some retirements 2 years ago between the 16-17 and actual and the budget for 17-18. No, the estimate. No, budget, sorry, for 17-18. I don't want to confuse you, but there is only, what I'm pointing out is that there's only a $114,674 increase between the 17-18 budget and the 18-19 budget. But that is partially because we over budgeted in 17-18 because the year before we had some retirements of teachers who are higher on the pay scale that were replaced with teachers lower on the pay scale. So there's another $100,000 there. So had that not happened, that was in an email from Bob, it would have been 2.6 something % increase. So that I just wanted to point that out and explain that because we often say that our personnel are moving on a 3% increase, and so if we don't cut personnel, that's going to just increase. So I want to explain why it was a little bit less. Does that make sense? Following? All right. Sure. Sure. We can do this however you think is most efficient.
Pen here. Line 121, and I know it was very sudden, but Barbara Likis, the SRO, last week talked about the idea of having a second, almost like a sub SRO, because she suggested the price would come in at around 32 or 33,000 to handle the other troop, whichever one isn't hers at the moment. She's Troop L, then the other one would be Troop A, and really enhance safety. That was her one recommendation, other than us all, keeping our eyes open and our doors closed, was have another SRO. And I see this has actually gone down, but then again, that really was just last week that she mentioned it. I'd like to see if we could consider that, work that in, and then what we might need to not omit something else, but maybe trim a couple places if we feel we don't want to raise the budget anymore in order to accomplish that, unless we're comfortable with that. I'm sure if that brings us from 397 to a number over 4, we'll probably want to trim gently somewhere else, because it's much more pleasant to be at 399 or 398 than 401.
Right.
But if we could consider that before we meet again, see if we could do something about that. I don't know. That's my opinion. If anybody else wants to weigh in on that.
I'm glad you brought that up because I thought about that too. That is not included here, and I think when it comes to the time when we're kind of putting in and out and talking about what stays and what doesn't, at least having that information in front of us would be helpful. I know I circled it. If you look back in the detail, Barbara Alenkis' salary, I feel like she's like around 45,000. I forget where that is. Because I think she's also like one of those contract. Is she contracted?
48,190.
48?
48,190 is the salary.
Okay.
It's under the 121 last line, school resource officer SRO.
Right.
That's on the detail page.
Bob, does that include additional costs, the car, the supplies, all
Nope,
that other
that's
stuff?
just
No.
salary.
So there are just I
There's
just wanted-
Right.
additional costs.
So
Maybe you should keep like a running list of all of the things people want to add or take away, and then,
well, I feel like
or at least we can
Well,
research.
we'll research.
yeah, we should.
Get
We
you
will want to research
Yeah.
that because I think it should be part of the conversation. So if you turn to the detail, page 3 of 13, about 3 sections down is where you'll see the cost of a school resource officer. Obviously, that's just salary. You have to figure out, add in the others. But you can also see up above the security person. I know Barbara had mentioned when she made her suggestion, she said instead of hiring 2 security people for the elementary, combining that into an SRO, adding more security people to, like we have here at the desk here, is also not part of this budget request. So whatever we look at would be in addition. Yeah, so whatever we would, yeah.
Yeah, there are other school districts that are considering what they call safety school advocates. And I have a job description that I pulled down, and their salary is, or at least what they're looking at is 32,000. You know, so there's a description here of what they have in mind, but basically it's just as you would think. It's not a full-fledged SRO, but it's just another set of.
But possibly a
Arms
little
and
more
legs.
trained than the security.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. If you read, I'll.
I
can
did.
share this.
I think you,
Did I copy that? Yeah.
I saw, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because the numbers are so similar, I think it may have been what Barbara was talking about. Yeah.
Maybe,
Okay.
maybe it was.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe it was. Yeah, so, I think we should have the costs in
But-
front of us for,
But looking at, for example, going like where Barbara was going with, we have, you know, security folks. If we bring in somebody like this, you know, could they also perform, you know, the other task of monitoring the front door, as an example, or other things, you know, that we're thinking about instead of, you know, 'cause you gotta figure out what are they gonna do? I mean, Barbara's running around, spending a lot of time just going back and forth, but if we did bring in an advocate like this, you know, we'd have to just make sure that they're, focused on what we're bringing them in for, but also, in between, are there other things they can get done, like additional duty kind of stuff that they could help out with? I
right.
don't know what that is, but just,
So I'm kind of wondering if we might want Barbara to do a little research. I would be curious in knowing what other options are. Like, for example, might this be something that we could share, you know, if we had a part-time, share with the towns? You know, the school day is not that long, or so just something, some sort of way to, if we don't go all the way to a full, adding a whole nother person, increasing the security. The whole idea of the two troops and the two radios really kind of made a lot of sense to me. But maybe there's some other ways we can shift this around too. So,
yeah,
would
it's
it be
gotta be
appro-
more than just that she needs a second radio monitor.
Well, but you don't want
Otherwise she wouldn't have asked.
right. Right. Proximity and the radio, but if we had someone, you know, I don't know, do Roxbury or Bridgewater need some additional time as well? And so could we have somebody going between those two schools, you know, 0.6 of the time, and the other 0.4, they're in the town, but, right, you know, doing other work that they might need. I'm not sure. And Pat, would that be appropriate to ask her to put some recommendations together, or is that an administration question?
I think the administration is a better place to start. There are a lot of issues and concerns, just from a safety point of view. First of all, if it's an SRO, it has to fall under a police department, and there are additional costs. If it's an advocate or anything else you want to call them, we have a really hard time keeping people in that position. If you just know here at Chapag and think about the changing faces, I mean, thank goodness for Rocky, who's here every morning, because other than that, it really is a revolving door. I personally think that there should be a safety discussion just in general, because, you know, just for example, you know, if I'm sitting at Booth or Burnham and I'm at the front door and I'm an advocate or whatever, I might be able to stop an irate parent. But certainly if somebody wants to do something untoward, all they need to do is walk around, and there are windows everywhere, and you know, we're like sitting ducks. So I just, before I understand the perception of it makes everybody feel better, and I certainly agree with that, I just think that, you know, there should be just a more of a plan on, because there's so many aspects of safety, and Barbara comes with one lens. She's a police officer, so she has one lens, and that's what you heard. And it was fabulous, but that's what you heard. So my recommendation would be to, you know, if you are gonna do anything, put some money in there, and you don't have to decide right away, just knowing, and then have a committee work what's the best thing to do. That would be my recommendation, but, I just think there's a lot of issues, you know, a lot of issues. You know, we usually get moms, or, you know, a mom sitting at a front door to elementary school is not, I mean, it's effective for some situations, but it's not effective for what I think we're thinking of when we heard Barbara speak.
Right.
Michael?
That makes a lot of sense.
I think we need to also pull in the communities in this conversation. I think the communities are obviously very much concerned about school safety in light of Sandy Hook and now more recently Lakeland. And it might be, if we're looking at shared resources, that we're already doing that. You know, for example, Bridgewater and Roxbury are sharing resources already as far as state troopers are concerned. What if we extended that to, you know, there's a need for enhanced school security. Is that something that the towns would also be interested in sharing? Somebody who could serve as an SRO maybe during the school day, and then in the evening, for example, work for the towns. Maybe that's something we can look at.
Thank you. Michelle, are we still on staffing?
Yep, we're in the 100s.
So there was a question on the teacher. So we're going to go down one math teacher,
Yes.
right? And so just, no, obviously we didn't hear of any programmatic cuts or consequences. Obviously we wouldn't be letting go of a math teacher or reducing our math teacher by one if that were the case, but I just want to say it out loud. Is that true?
That's correct. We have one teacher, if you recall, we have a math teacher who just became certified in physics. So she gives us a lot of room to teach different courses at the middle high school. Because we're introducing physics first at the high school, and we want to have a more dedicated focus on STEM, when the schedule was prepared, they were able to reduce the math position and add the physics position, knowing that we have a teacher who could teach both, currently on staff.
So there's no programmatic loss there at
No.
all, or, oh, that,
No.
and really, even as far as, you know, number of levels of particular different.
No, everything's similar.
Okay. So just
Is,
ask a
Yeah.
question out loud. Michael?
is that also the case in art, Pat? Because I know you mentioned that there would be a
Yes.
0.4 cut there.
Yes, same in art.
No programmatic change in art.
Nope. Everything, you know, one of the things that we have worked on, Lori and Kim and Karen and Teresa, and myself, really trying to rotate the schedule of classes so that this way, when you come into the high school as an 8th grader, you know what year ceramics is going to be given, what year photography 1, photography 2, so that this way, you know, during your 4 years there are 2 years that you can take that course. So it comes with pre-planning, but that's what happens when you have a small school. When we bring in the agri-science students, you will have more kids and you will have more opportunities to have more classes. But this is the way you survive, but there are no programmatic changes.
Thank you. Julie?
At Booth, I know there was some discussion of combining grades and changing numbers of teachers, and I think we came to a decision on not to do that. And I just wanted sort of the upper line of what was the logic and what are the numbers.
Okay, at Booth, we currently have a kindergarten class with 6 students. They will be getting a 7th student because that's the student that remained at WPS in the wheelchair. So they're going to have 7 in 1st grade next year. And currently, the last I looked, please don't hold me to this, there were 13 incoming kindergarten kids. What I have asked Mrs. Colella to do, and I've talked to the staff and she's talked to the parents, is they are going to investigate different configurations in those classes with K1 and 2, but we're not cutting staff at this point because we want to give them the same courtesy year and preparation year that we gave to Burnham to prepare to do this. My recommendation is if next year the incoming kindergarten class is very small, then that's when they would start to really do some different configuration.
Are there any other questions about the 100s? The only other thing I would point out is that the salary for the director of the Ag STEM program is not reflected here because it's reflected at the end in the program change. So that will get moved back into this 100s, but it's not there now. Yeah.
Before this .4 FTE cut in art at the high school, at the middle high school, it's Chippewa Valley School, how many FTEs do you have in art here now?
Oh my gosh, we have three.
You have 3 FTEs, so this will reduce you to 2.6.
Correct.
So someone's going to be going part-time is what you're telling me.
Correct.
Good question. Any other questions?
Again, no programmatic impact
No.
from that.
Mm-hmm.
So is the art, is that because of student population decreasing, or classes are being eliminated, or why the teacher for the art being eliminated or reduced?
It has to do with lower enrollment in the classes.
Okay.
And it has to do with lower enrollment of students. You know, our population is going down in
Right,
middle high
right.
school.
Right.
So that's really what it is. But there are no classes that are being
All right,
canceled.
that's what I wanted to make sure, that we were
Yes.
still offering
Yes,
just as
still
many
offering.
art classes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, John?
Just a comment as far as the Region 12 administrator's salary, which is posted at $215,583. And when you look at many other school districts throughout the state, I'm looking here at Bridgeport, $175,000 for the
John,
superintendent.
sorry, what line item are you looking at?
Well, it would come under administrators, I guess, but it's actually the superintendent's salary.
Superintendent's salary.
So that's page 1 of 13.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you look at the top section, that's where the administrator's salaries are.
I mean, should we set the bar that high? I mean, obviously, that's probably the ceiling, but when you look at many other school districts, you know, I think we really need to bring it back in line with, the relationship of, the number of students in the district. And, I mean, we could possibly save $50,000 or $40,000 if we brought it in line with, like, Watertown, for instance, superintendent's salary. So there's, there's $40,000 that you could put into an SRO or an additional teacher, and also we should seriously consider the 126,233 for the ag director's position. We don't know what, the rest of the school, the 19 other school districts pay their ag director. I mean, we need to configure exactly, more realistically, what we're intending on paying these 2 positions.
I think that's a great suggestion, and when it comes time to sort of playing with the numbers, that's definitely one line, the regional admin salary, that we can look at. We just need to also be careful that superintendents are paid on a package, and so you don't always know how much is salary and how much they're receiving in other benefits, whether it's annuity or health. So it's not always apples to apples, so we just need to keep that in mind, but that does not mean that's not a place we could look for some potential savings. I did want to point out that the director of the Ag STEM is a year-round position, unlike the other teachers, and also is a stipended position because of the SAEs, I forget. Thank you. I was like, I always want to call it an internship, supervised agricultural experiences that they need to go and observe. So their day is longer, their year is longer. So even though they fall in the teacher contract, that is their duties are beyond the regular teacher. I mean, we could certainly do some research into the other programs, but I believe that was done when we put together the estimates.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Or actually, just a statement. I do want to remind the board that the line item 110, the administrator's salaries, are flat year over year, and again, that was because of the contract that we negotiated earlier this year. I guess negotiated is probably not even an accurate term. That was offered to us by the administrators. We could have had a bigger increase this year, and I just want to remind everybody of that. Michael.
Speaking of reminders, and I apologize, Michelle, if you went over this already, but if you're looking at the 100, that the dollar increase that you have down there, 114,674, it looks like the biggest area that it's coming from would be 111 teachers. And could you go over again very quickly why we saw such a big growth there? Did we hire? I don't remember hiring.
It's really not a big, I could probably help you with that.
Sure.
The overall for that teacher was 1.61%, okay, for budget to budget. But it had to do with a change in salaries based on turnover. We had staff that left us, were in the 17-18 budget, churned the staff, the new number was lower. If you take that into account, it actually goes up to 2.5, which is in line with what the settlement was. So even though it appears to be the largest, the other lines in there where you're seeing flat numbers or very minuscule changes, those are a lot of contracts that aren't settled. They were just moved as is, no contract, the money's picked up within that account in the overall 100s as a holding place until we get settled contracts. We accounted for the money, it's just not in those various lines because in preparation for negotiations, you don't put it in the line that you're negotiating with. Otherwise, you may as well not negotiate.
It's a little telegraphing.
Yeah.
So
So it's accounted for, but it's in the overall.
Got it.
So you don't see these big numbers per se. That contract was in place. So that's where you would pick that up. But it's a churn of the staff.
and the contract that's moving, which is 2.5%. So ours actually moved less than the 2.5 because of the turnover that we saw. So that reflects 89 teachers moving on a step and in an increase. So the fact that it's less than the 2.5 helps us a lot because that would have had a huge impact on the budget. Yeah, yeah. Great questions. Anyone else in the 100s have anything that they would like clarified? All right. 200s is not something that we usually spend a lot of time on, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time. Just if you look down, the $526,000 increase reflects, well, it's an 18% increase over last year. So, and I did some rough math. and that increase right there is 62% of the overall budget increase. So Bob's working on negotiating that as much as he can, but I don't expect that number to move very much, maybe a little tiny bit, but based on the estimates or the proposals he got from the other companies, it looks like that's the number we're going to have to go with.
We went to market with this with 5 companies, 3 of which turned us down altogether. Weren't interested in it. 2 that were, and they came in close to what we have for the renewal. So at least from an actuarial standpoint, they're all looking at the same demographics and the same claims that we had versus the incumbent carrier. Now it's a question of working the incumbent carrier, because there's minor tweaks between the level of coverages that the other 2 that gave us numbers on. There's some differences.
Can I just make a comment and then, or did you have comments? All right, I just wanted to also point out that an employee's health insurance, it's negotiated, or it's part of the contract, the portion of the premium that is covered by the employee. And over the years, we have moved the employees into health savings accounts whenever possible, have moved up copay situations. So that has been a negotiating piece over the last several contracts. But as you heard earlier, we're in the middle of one now, so we can't push any of that burden to the employees. It's negotiated contract. So,
Well, the other thing I would point out is that one of the reasons why our health amounts were lower in the last few years is we, over the course of several negotiations, we brought all of the bargaining units into the high deductible health plan. That saved us a lot of money, and those savings continued beyond just the 3-year term of the contract, because you were at such a lower base. And the net effect of that is that those savings have worked their way through the system, and now you're seeing increases in premiums, and you're no longer seeing the savings because they've pretty much played out. So that's sort of where you are. But I will say that we're in a better position than we otherwise could have been, and over the years, the percentage that's covered by the region will drop, and by the employees probably increase.
Joe,
thanks.
Michael, go ahead.
Just another question. I thought, Dr. Cosentino, when you were presenting the budget, you talked about the fact that there may have been some unanticipated increase in medical expenses on the part of staff benefits. Is that something that would be reflected here?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I can answer that.
Go
That's what drives your premium. We had large, we call them shock claims. Shock, because they're so huge. There's not a lot of them, but we got hit with many of them this year. Usually you get 1 a year. Right now we got 5 that exceed almost $600,000. So 5 claims over 600,000, or 5 cases that exceed over $600,000 factored into the actuarial, and it's spread out. It wasn't one particular month. It's spread out over the last 12 months, and that's what they gauge their projections on, unfortunately. And this happens. We got it this year. Hopefully it goes away and you get back to some normalcy again. It's what actuaries study. I don't know how they do it, but they study it and they make sure they pass it on.
In that sense, it kind of reminds me of unanticipated special education
Could very
expenses, which can vary wildly from
right.
year to year.
We
It's the same
rode the
kind of thing.
We rode the good side of the wave for 14 years, basically, between plan design, and we haven't had these many claims all at one time. This year, we got them all at once.
So, Bob, just to kind of recap, if we're trying to explain this to the public, why such a large increase, we've got 2 main reasons then that have been mentioned. One, that Greg was just talking about, the fact that we've moved through the savings that we
enjoy.
we enjoyed from the moving employees to the high deductible savings plan a few years back. And now we've had a large number of shock premiums,
Shock claims.
shock claims, right?
That's what they're
Shock
referred
claims.
to as.
Which resulted in shock premiums.
Right, exactly.
Right, it's unfortunate,
Shocking
and,
numbers.
you know, hopefully those people are on the mend, it won't happen again.
Is the third reason because we're always talking about rising healthcare costs in general? Would that be a third reason, or is that really not coming into play here?
It plays into it, as, it's actually, when you talk about it, it's actually a function as well of how dependent we've become on the drug portion of a medical plan, and drugs have gotten very expensive. And it's just a national issue.
Thank you.
I know this comes up every year, but under 512, transportation, in-district private. Are we still in the 500s?
No, we're still in the 100.
Oh,
200.
didn't we go into the 500s?
I like her style, I like her style. Go
Let's
for
just
it.
All right, so,
jump to the 500.
all right, so,
I like your style.
so clearly we need,
Oh, I clearly
what
jumped
Lisa
ahead.
is
So
trying to
sorry.
say is we need
Move
to
it
pick
along.
up the pace. That's what she's trying to say.
This is what.
Nice, very
what-
good tactic,
that
I
was
like
funny.
that.
What,
Yeah.
well, I actually was thinking of almost not to the 900s. I was thinking of skipping almost to the 700s. I would like to move on. 300s. There are a few things to talk about there, but the largest portion of that increase is under pupil services 323, and that's driven by IEPs. Again, not anything that we really can play with. So I would move on. I would also move on from purchase property services. There's a little bit of maintenance kind of stuff there, but it's all pretty regular, and the increase is $11,000. So not a lot of savings to be found there. If we move to the 500s, even though Lisa was really excited to get here, if you'll look and see, there's a decrease. So I don't know that that's a place we want to spend a lot of time tonight. Okay, let's see what your question is.
So I know, I think I asked this last year, and it still always bothers me that the transportation for in-district private, which is almost $100,000, and I still don't understand why we do that. Because it's
Required by federal law.
but it's mandated but not funded?
It's mandated by law. It's not funded by the state of Connecticut, but it's our burden to provide the same level of transportation,
Yeah.
provided that these private schools have over 50% or more of the students have to be from resident of the state of Connecticut.
State of Connecticut?
Yep. So, for example, the Gunnery doesn't have 50% of their
Oh, because of
population, so
the-
we
okay.
don't have to go near them.
Okay.
The other schools, Montessori and,
So it's mostly Montessori.
right,
Runs
and then
in.
some private that we reimburse parents because it's cheaper than buying a bus.
Okay.
Well, otherwise, we would have to get
All
a bus.
right.
It's unfortunate, but
It just,
you look at the alternative.
When they say unfunded mandate,
I know.
That's a good
exactly.
example.
Exactly.
Well-
So,
yeah, but just to represent those parents, they are taxpayers.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, sure.
And this bill that gets divided back into the respective towns and gets put into the mill rates, they don't get discounts on their taxes because they're not using the public school system. So in a way, they're making a rather large contribution and not drawing any resources or burden on the district. So you could look at it and say, and the trade for that is we may have to provide them with some transportation costs. May make it sit a little bit better.
go ahead.
But I want to just be respectful of our community for the people who make decisions that they're, free to make, that they are still paying taxes.
But, I'm sorry. go ahead.
The other question that I had was on 511, which I assume are our regular buses that we provide for our students. and there is a significant increase there. I'm not sure what meeting this was that we talked about this idea of the fact that, and it may have been one of the first selectmen pointing out the fact that on occasion she's looked at buses that seemed like they were only half filled or maybe even less.
Yeah,
in
well,
terms-
I responded to Barbara Henry about that issue.
Right.
And explained to her that over 10 years, we took out of the fleet of buses a little better than 6 buses. Over that same period of time, it kind of paralleled the drop in enrollment. However, the issue when you see it is one of two things: the area that you have to cover and the time on the clock to get it done doesn't allow us to do it. I mean, realistically, if you asked me to put all of the kids from Burnham School on one bus, I could do it. Problem is, you'd be on there for 2 hours. If you want to do that, okay, you'd have more kids in the bus, but they would be on there for 2 hours. And that same situation plays out because we're running against the clock, and it's where we have to go.
And
The area.
and again, maybe you can fill me in on your response. I think one of her questions was, what about a situation of a junior or a senior who has the bus provided to them, but quite
Chooses
frankly
not to.
uses it very rarely, usually it's
Correct.
being driven or drives their own car. Is there any savings to be accrued there if we get them to commit that they are providing their own transportation?
All I could try to explain to you is there's this freshman on this side of them and a sophomore on that side of them, and we still have to go by there. So, I mean, you're not saving anything because you still have to cover the same area. If you could compact them all so that we could get them in one place and make less stops, don't go on so many roads that we're going on, you could perhaps reduce some more of the buses. What that does to whether they choose to use it or not is another matter. It's just the area. You've got a lot. The more kids you could get in here, the more seats would get filled.
Yeah.
It would still take you the same amount of time. Yes.
On that same line, if you look at the
511?
511, yep. 2015-16 actual 802, actual 798, and then the estimate for this year of 793. We seem to be holding around 800,000, but you've budgeted higher. Is there something variable in the contract that you're hedging for?
No, it's when we shift from special, because we have to split these buses for reimbursement purposes to the state as who's on what buses.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to just move from one line to another, but there's a natural increase in the contract anyway.
There is.
And when you have 24 buses out there, it doesn't take much to move the number up. But it's a contract that's got one more year to go.
Okay.
But we shift we call it the buses assigned to each category based on the need that we have.
So what you're saying is you budgeted 850. The reason it was less is because that 50 or 60 was actually
Right.
picked up somewhere down
Correct.
in like the vocational bus or something. Okay. Did you have? Oh, John.
Yeah, I got a comment the other day from a taxpayer concerning the busing. Do the buses come back after the AM run? Do they all go back to Beebrook?
At the end of the elementary run, yes,
Yeah.
because that's where they start out.
One suggestion was put all the drivers on a minivan, leave the buses in Bridgewater, leave the buses in Roxbury, put all the drivers on a minivan and drive them back to the depot. It would save something, fuel, round trip fuel
Wouldn't-
twice.
It wouldn't necessarily save a lot of money because they'd have to go back and get them and then get back to Chippewa to start the afternoon run.
Well, the buses would already be Oh, yeah.
They're
that's
not
right.
sitting
They'd
over-
have to go to Chapag.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
get it, yeah. Hmm.
I mean, there's, there's a lot of, you look at one piece of this, but you have to look at the whole day of what's going on.
That's the thing.
I mean, we could have an early
of
dismissal
moving
situation, need the buses, the first one to get out of here is up here, but now you're saying all the buses are down there. Say, what your savings are minuscule.
And the other thing, you know, when we think about safety and security, we need those bus drivers to be with their buses wherever they are. So if there is ever an evacuation or something, we need them to be able to mobilize very quickly.
Yeah, we have them on, they have a separate group. When you get an alert message, we have bus drivers just on their own group, because we can send that out to them, give them a heads up that they need to get back to the lot, while we're sending the other message out to the parents that the kids are coming home. So we do a lot of those things. We have groups for even the town, so they have a heads up as well.
Right, any other transportation questions? Thank you, Bob. That was really helpful. Supplies, 600. The 600s, unless there's a burning question, I would like to move on to the next. Yeah, it's a very slight increase. I appreciate the work of all of the administrators who really tried to hold the line on their supplies increases, because they knew that we were going to be hit in this budget in other places. We can come back to the detail if we really need to, but a lot of this we can't move much with electricity and gas and such. So, having said that, here's the 700s property and program changes. This is where, you know, this is the sort of the heart of the discussion. And I would like everyone to just take a look at it and try to anticipate your questions for the next time. I realize it's 9:30. I think we've made really good progress. We've kind of hit on most parts of the budget. We have a good list of preliminary questions. So maybe if we spend another 15 minutes or so on this part, we'll have touched all the big parts of the budget, and we'll have a good sense of where to begin on our next one. If you stay just on page 9, you'll see that there are several categories up top. So equipment, educational is the first one. These are the big changes that sort of stand out, and which is why they're captured here in the 700 and not buried in the supplies or some of the other equipment categories. If you this one for this year, that category is going down, and it's not a large portion, so I don't have a lot of questions about that one. The capital technology, however, there is an increase. Some of everything that's made that makes up that budget is in 733 and down below under capital technology. Those of us in the finance committee that went to the workshops were able to hear Karen explain what all of these are for, and I think and why. And I think it would be probably helpful to have her do that again, whether that's tonight or at the next workshop. But I had sort of an overarching question about the capital technology, which doesn't have to be answered tonight. But if you look historically, I know we've got ourselves set up on these replacement cycles to try to level that line out. And, 15-16 was 102,000. 16, 17, 74, and then the budget, and then the estimate 58, 59,000. So it was up, and then it came down, and then it's going up again. And I'm just wondering if we might be able to look at ways of leveling that out a little bit more, maybe in the 75, instead of having 50 something one year and 110 another year. Those swings are challenging, as this is a challenging year. I know that means we wouldn't be able to do all the things that we're trying to do, but I don't know if there are some creative ways we could you know, replace one less class of Chromebooks or whatever it might be. So that was just a thought that I had about the capital technology looking historically. But does anyone have questions specifically that they would like to see answered about the capital technology request, which is up over last year, $50,000?
Karen, what's the useful life of the Chromebook? What are we refreshing them every 3 years, every 4 years?
Do you want me to go to the microphone? Just to answer the question.
Yeah, okay, why not?
Otherwise, you're not gonna hear it over the phone.
Is this on? Okay. Generally, we plan for replacement grade when they come into middle school. We give all of our 6th graders Chromebooks. We anticipate that we will replace them when they are in 9th grade. 9th graders will keep them until they graduate. So that's the intended. They're going to go about 4 years for the high school students, 3 years for the middle school. However, those are then put into life in another way. So anything that's left over when we replace, for example, we always have leftover Chromebooks that are still in workable condition, but in 9th grade we want to refresh them. That's part of the program. Michelle, to answer your question, and I did want to answer this for you because there was a change this past year, and that was that the makers of Chromebooks have realized that spending $200 or $250 on a device and us keeping them for 4 or 5 years, we have our original Chromebook still in place. Please understand that the seniors are using their original Chromebooks. You have the original Chromebooks. They're still working. What ended up happening is that Google and the companies have realized they're running a profit problem here because we're buying them and they're lasting forever. So what has happened is they have now put what's called end of life on the Chromebooks, where you will not be able to update the operating system after, and it's dependent upon model. So some of the models go out 3 years, some of the models go out 4 years right now. So it's very strategic when we look at the models to make sure that we buy the models that are going to go out for 4 years. The Chromebook devices themselves are lasting way longer than we anticipated that they would last. What we are running into this year is end of life. All of our Chromebooks that are at the elementary level, we only bought 1 grade level for the elementary model. What happened was as our seniors graduated, we took their Chromebooks down to the elementary level and they had their second life. So we were able to populate our elementary school grades using second life Chromebooks. What's happening is those 3 grades, or 3 grades down at the elementary schools, and our seniors for next year, their Chromebooks are all coming out of life at one time. So we are going with our regular replacement cycle for our 6th and 9th graders. But frankly, next year's seniors need Chromebooks. They're operating on Chromebooks that are quite old. And our elementary schools, we had to add those in as well. So we have a higher cost for them this year that should not continue to happen. It's a bump that happened to us this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a comment here which brings us back to the policy discussion we had before. So when you think end of life, when you have operating systems, that means they can't be patched. So any device that's end of life that's on our networks is a vulnerability from a security standpoint because it's not being patched. So if ransomware comes out tomorrow and you've got 100 Chromebooks sitting on your network, they're all vulnerable. So it's important that you do get rid of your end of life machines and you keep from that standpoint. It isn't just about the money, because if something else happens on the other side, we'll be paying for these Chromebooks 10 times over.
I think the other thing that you also have to know about the Chromebooks is once they go out of life, we can no longer conduct any testing on them. So SBAC testing cannot be done on Chromebooks that are out of life. So once those end in June, those Chromebooks effectively they have very little use to us at that point, because one of the big reasons we went with the Chromebooks was the ability to have all of our students test in their classrooms, in addition to all the great other things. But that is a primary purpose. If we had to then start taking all those kids and cycling them through labs, that would be a huge step backwards for us, for the cost of what a Chromebook cost us.
I'm just looking at, in terms of technology for Chapag, would there be a significant cost savings if we move to a bring your own device policy for Chapag students coming from a school that does that, I know that there are pros and cons. I know one of the pros would be obviously significant cost savings in terms of outlay from the district for those devices. Do you think the cons would outweigh it?
We actually have a BYOD policy here. And as you travel through the higher grades in the high school, you'll see that we have a lot of kids, especially because of their exposure to higher end digital content here. We have a large number of kids that are carrying their own MacBooks around. However, I can tell you, I often get kids come into my office telling me their MacBook broke and they desperately need to be able to access the curriculum today. So the BYOD is a great idea, and it's a great supplement for us to have. With us truly wanting to continue to move the digital curriculum forward, and at this point, honestly, we are so digital in the curriculum that we have. I can tell you this because the internet went down for the first time in a long time. Sen had a problem. Bob knows this. Sen had a problem, I was 2 weeks ago. It went down for a total of 12 minutes
It was like,
across the entire state. I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from teachers within
Crazy.
seconds, students in my office that they couldn't, at virtual high schools down. I can't get in. We are so dependent upon the devices at this point that when we have a student that doesn't have their own personal device and they have signed up to use their personal device, they're coming to me immediately. So I think the BYOD is a nice supplement. I don't think it's something that we can depend upon for all of our kids to have all the time. So when we budget, we always budget that every child will have a Chromebook. We just don't buy them if we don't need them. So for example, with next year's seniors, we have to account to purchase every one a Chromebook, but we won't buy them until we know how many students actually are going to need them. Does that answer your question?
Were there any other questions on the,
it was the
Capital
longest 12
technology.
minutes, by the way, that you could ever.
Longest
I can imagine.
12 minutes
Like, it was
ever.
half a day in 12 minutes.
while we're on the capital technology, and we have a couple more minutes, I was looking at the Z Space, and I know that you shared with us in our workshops that this is a lease. So
It
that
is a
we're,
pilot lease.
It's a pilot lease, which I think is wonderful. But I'm just wondering if you can speak to. I was looking at the fact that you know, it's like the station. It's a fixed cost, and so to put it in all 3 elementary schools, having just put in Project Lead the Way, and the Gifted and Talented, like I'm just wondering, have we seen Z Space in elementary schools? Do we feel like it will be used? It's not a huge savings, so I'm hesitant to even bring that up, but I just want to be prepared.
Z-Space was originally requested by the elementary schools. That's where the initial request came from. They'd seen it at Chase Collegiate. I had seen it previously at ISTE a few years ago. And what we went back and forth with the numbers a few times with Z-Space themselves, and essentially to purchase the equipment is astronomical. So not knowing whether or not we were going to find value in it, the option was to go forward with a lease of 1 lab that would then be split up between the schools so that we could do some true pilot testing to find out where it had the biggest impact. But I do think that if you're looking at really becoming a STEM school and really pushing the envelope a little bit, we are digital in so many ways. This is something that is very different. And so I think it is worthy of a pilot. I'm not sure we're ready to go all in with it until we have the data back that it is something that is worthwhile for us to invest in.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on technology while Karen's standing up there? No? All right, thank you so much. A quick look at capital facilities. I know if you look in the box where it's detailed out, Michael, you'll see the restroom. Was it your question or was it Anthony's? I don't remember. The restroom at Booth.
It was mine.
Okay, is there in the the request. So just so you can understand, and Bob, maybe you'll be able to help us with this too. These are all the things, the capital things that are left for the operating budget, 78,550. A lot of what normally would be here was moved over into the capital non-recurring funds. And all of this stuff, it appears needs to be done. I guess the only conversation would be, do we want to try to move any more out to the 1%? Either, I think the elementary fund is actually mostly spoken for, but do we want to move any out, and is any of it eligible? Would be my question.
You could perhaps move a few of these items over to the, I'm going to call it the 1% fund that you could fund all of the schools with. We left the ones for the elementary schools because we were using those funds first, and we didn't move any of these, letting you take an opportunity to look at these because they were specific to elementary schools.
Okay.
I mean, we could do that, make a supplemental, but it has to be for capital. It can't be painting rooms,
Right.
those kind of things. So as quickly, if you look at it, the ADA restroom, that's capital. That could go out of that 1% if you wanted to. The basketball hoop system, that's a general repair. That's, the classrooms are not. As far as the Washington Primary School, there are items in there that you could do. The fire door upgrade is something that the fire marshal has been with Don on. The calf ceiling and the LED, you certainly could do that. Bathroom partitions are really a replacement of some normal that you would normally get into, and the electric winch is the same kind of idea. The well pump you could put over into the capital 1% account. Beyond that, the rest of these things are quite small. I mean, we could move some of it. I could come up with a list and just go through it, and we could bring it back for the next time if that's what your pleasure.
Yeah, well, that was very helpful. There's definitely some of the larger items there.
They're eligible
Could-
to do it that way.
Could be moved. I'm not saying that and we don't have to decide that tonight, but it's nice to
Correct.
know what's
I'll-
eligible. And as we're looking at the final and moving one or two of those might help us. Yeah, that's almost $50,000. And like I said, there's 744,000 plus the 213 that's coming, so we're looking at about $900,000 in
There's
that.
sufficient money in there. It's just that
There's
they
some
were-
room. So
They're
that's
really geared at that elementary school level with, and I didn't want to get messy with the lease money, and it's an opportunity to do it. So we'll develop and you can make your determination, and
okay.
if you'd like, you can all raise your
can move
hand
it.
again.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, the last part of that program improvement changes, I think we've already talked about the teachers.
It just
Yeah.
I'm making assumption, but there's no numbers next to the teachers. Is that because they're netting each other out?
Yep. One's out, one's in. I
assume that's what you were doing, but
Yeah. That's what I was doing.
And there's the reduction for the art teacher. We spoke about the director of agri-science. We can take a look for some other comparisons, but that's the budget for now. And then just a few additional items that were needed. How do I know this? The reading power speaker, oh, you said this in your presentation, Pat, was an author. Yeah, an author visit. I love the idea of the whole school 612 reading a book together and meeting with the author. I think those shared experiences are really powerful. There's the Project Lead the Way for the 5th grade, so that the schools will now be Project Lead the Way all the way through. Oh, we spoke about this in finance, I believe, the additional days for the ed tech staff. These are, it's an extending their year. They're sort of, in between the school year and the full year, so
Yeah,
it's like
they're-
5 days, it's
As
an additional.
the technology expanded, it's become apparent that we need them to maintain this over the summer months, where we were jamming everything right before school, trying to get this done. And in some instances, it spilled over into the academic year. So we really need these folks around during the summertime.
All right, Anthony?
Bob, the 126 for the Ag Science Director, that's base and benefits?
Yep.
That's
it's
fully
salary
loaded,
and
that's fully
benefits,
loaded
correct.
number, right?
It's everything.
Yep, that's what I thought.
If it gets approved, the budget would get approved, it would be pushed back to where, this page is what I call transparency, so that it's not, you don't have to go looking inside the other. It makes it better for the public.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the property program changes? I think that that's probably good for tonight. It's getting close to 10 o'clock. I think,
Oh, we have. Yeah, we have.
really?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
Well, we skimmed a couple of the others too, which I figured people go back. Okay, we could take a quick look. The 800, 900 dues and fees, debt service. Pat explained this pretty well in her presentation. So I don't, if people have additional I'm not going to spend time on it unless you have additional questions.
I'm just going to ask a question again of Bob, because I heard it before, but just to be very clear. So the bond interest that is reflected in 832, that is the bond interest on the ag bands, correct?
There's interest, there's about $9,600 related to the line, the $450,000. They both will expire. The 150 is for the ban for the ag program. So if you take 150, leaves you 9,675, which is the interest for the last payment of the 450.
Okay.
Anthony, on page 13 of 13 towards the back is the
Details
detail.
that out?
It's
Yep,
detailed out.
details all of the different
And
bonds and bans.
It splits, it cleans us and gives you the two pieces.
Any other questions? All right, thank you everyone for your attention. I feel like we went through pretty well. The plan for now is to meet again in 2 weeks at a regularly planned meeting. Please prepare any questions you have, because
Please get them to,
if we are able to set the budget on that meeting, then we don't have to have a special meeting. But we have until April 9th, so we can also take another meeting if we need to, because I'm not sure what's on the next agenda.
well, we'll make sure this is at the top of that next agenda. Got to get to it. Got
Yeah.
to do it. All right, have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.